Welcome to Interior Analysis. I'm Evan Westman,
I'm Jelani and Kelly.
and today we're doing The Devil Wears Prada. So, before we start, there's a listener who's going to remain anonymous that I'm going to shout out a little bit at the beginning of this because this is one of their favorite movies, and they've called it a guilty pleasure of theirs, which I hope by the end of the episode we have proven to some extent that I think that label is. I understand where it's coming from, but I don't think you need to feel guilty about this. Like I think it's just
Nah.
good. But it does kind of come off as like not. It's not like serious, so it does feel like kind of a guilty pleasure movie. But they also sent in, as a follow up to our last episode, some picks for who they would want as fictional characters in high ranking government positions. So I'm just going to read some of these off real quick. Head of the CIA, Jennifer Gardner's character in Alias. I can't say I know who that is.
Oh, I saw a clip of that. She got different aliases. It's like a master of disguise type thing.
So
I
it's like a
think.
spy.
Like yeah,
Okay.
I think.
All right. Speaker of the House, Stanley Tucci from Hunger Games. I think Caesar Flickerman's the character. That would be interesting.
I've never seen the Hunger Games. I don't.
They're okay. I don't know if you missed out on a ton, but like as YA dystopian novels go, it's probably
Divergent, Maze Runner.
I would s- I w- I mean I didn't read either of those, but Divergent and Maze Runner felt like knockoffs of Hunger Games, which is like the first two are actually pretty solid, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Her Supreme Court, Denzel Washington's character from The Equalizer, M from Skyfall, the one played by Judi Dench, and then Katniss from Hunger Games. I agree with the second two. I haven't seen The Equalizer, so I don't know.
I have. It's funny. I'm surprised she didn't put him at the head of the CIA because Denzel
I know,
Washington's
isn't he like a
character.
hitman or something?
No, he was in the CIA.
Oh.
Yeah.
Being in the CIA, I feel like is a very different skill set from running it, though. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
necessarily translates. I see it, though.
He'd be equalizing a whole lot of Supreme Courtness stuff.
Yeah.
'Cause he's the... Because he's the equalizer, Evan.
Yep. Yeah, I gotcha. M from Skyfall, Judi Dench, I think she would be at home there. Ben Affleck from Boiler Room as Secretary of the Treasury. No idea who that is, but I'll... Sure.
I just imagined a movie about him getting trapped in a boiler room
I really
and
would
it
hope
being
it's not that.
being really hot. I don't think that's the movie. I hope it's not the movie, but I just imagine it's just an hour and a half of Ben Affleck sweating like, oh man, this boiler room is something, huh?
I mean, there's stuff like that, like really low budget things, but I feel like with Ben Affleck, you have a big enough budget to not do that. So
Yeah,
probably,
but
it's probably
if
some
you
kind of
save
metaphor.
all your money, it's pay for Ben Affleck and then the boiler room, you're good, and sweat,
That's
pay
true.
for sweat. Oh, this boiler room is really something. That's
Yep.
the whole movie.
Yeah. Secret Service, they only put one. Melissa McCarthy from Bridesmaids. That would be
Wasn't she scrapping people in that movie? I saw that movie. Like
Bridesmaids.
she was like squaring up with people, wasn't she?
yeah.
Did she square up with somebody?
I feel like maybe it's been a while since I saw it. Is she like? Maybe I'm getting that confused with another Melissa McCarthy character, but like, does she work in the government in that? She has like some weird job, I feel like.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, she's weird as hell in that movie, but I get it because she's like loyal to her friends, so she'd be loyal to the president.
Mm.
I get that.
Yeah, although when you hear the presidential pick, I don't know if your opinion will change. Secretary of Education, I like this one. Jack Black from School of Rock.
I never completed that movie. I'm
That's
so sad.
It's not half bad. The only issue I see with that is that now, like his whole thing with rock and roll is sticking it to the man, and I don't know how that's going to carry over when he's working for like
The man.
the ultimate man, and kind of is the man in some cases there.
Music would be part of the American I mean, it'd be better than what we have now, right?
It would, yeah. Also, like music programs, I think get defunded like all the time. So that
Probably.
that would be a change that's worth making.
I used to play trumpet.
Oh, really? Okay. I did for like a year, maybe two.
I was a trumpet boy for like 3.5 years.
I don't miss doing that. It.
I didn't like practicing, like, cause we had to like it counted as part of our grade. Like we had practice sheets and everything. I hated that,
Mm.
but like playing in band and being with the peeps in the band, that was cool.
Yeah, but I feel like trumpet on its own though kind of just doesn't sound good. Like with other stuff it sounds good, but I feel like just trumpet is like eh. Last two, Walter Mitty from The Secret Life of Walter Mitty as vice president, and then this will transition us nicely, Miranda Priestley as president.
Yeah,
So I don't know how to feel about that. You had her on your Supreme Court. So those are like pretty different positions, but I don't know which one she's better for. Like,
she'd kill either one, I think, cause she's so unfeeling.
I mean, she would like, I think she's like very comfortable in power, obviously. I don't know that I would want her running the country necessarily because I don't know what like her like views are on stuff. I don't feel
Hmm.
like they'd be terrible, but I mean, she would get stuff done for sure. She would be right at home. I feel like she'd be more at home as president than Supreme Court because she has like everyone working under her and like, you know, everyone would get their coffee to her on time if she was the president. So that would vibe well. I don't think the same really applies to the Supreme Court. She might have to kind of pull her own weight a little more there.
She'd have a gavel.
She'd have a gavel, which but she doesn't need a gavel. Like, can you really see Miranda Priestley using a gavel? Like, she her chin is her gavel. Like, that sounds weird, but like it kind of
I just imagine her slamming her face down on her desk.
order. God, that hurt. I what I meant with that, I mean, there's that scene where she's like nodding and like approving slash disapproving everything, and
With their pursed lips and all that.
yeah, there has been one smile on record. I don't know how that would translate, but yeah, either way, obviously she wouldn't be as at home in government as she would in runway, but like it wouldn't be that much of a stretch, I think, to put her in.
Dressing badly would be against the law.
Yeah, well, oh, but see, as a Supreme Court justice, she has a dress code. She's got to wear the robe. Like,
Ooh.
so I don't know if she'd like make a new souped up version that would like, you know, look more to her liking, or does she just have to roll with that? That might be a deal breaker. All right, so well, let's go through some of your reactions before we get into it, because this was your first time seeing it, right?
Hmm. My mom's had it for years. I just used her DVD. Good character introduction for Meryl Streep's character. I think this was an example used in screenwriting one for me. Like, I think there's five, but I forget the middle level. So I'm just gonna say four. There's four different levels to what a character is really like, and the least reliable. It starts. Let me go from least to most reliable. The least reliable is what a character says about themselves, and then what a character does, and then like that character's actions, and then it goes what other people say about the character, and then it's other people's reaction to that character. That's the most reliable.
Mm-hmm.
So this was used, I believe, like I said, in screenwriting one. This intro scene was shown to me as to what type of they're showing off the bat what type of character Miranda is. Very demanding, and people are terrified of her, terrified of messing up around her and all that, and that stays consistent throughout the entire movie. So
Yeah, I had that exact same lesson given to me, not in the same class. It was before coming to college, actually. Yeah, exactly like you said, that scene used to show that lesson of like how do you show an audience who a character is. I
mm-hmm.
think two and three, like those things were flipped in the way it was taught to me, though. I think
It might have been. It might be. I might not be saying it right 100%, but yeah.
it's close though. Like it was all those same four things. I think how a character acts was ranked as second best though. I do want to ask though, because ever since I've heard that, I have really wondered about that. Like, do you agree with that ranking? Because I don't like disagree with it, but part of me feels like how a character acts really is the best way to like actually get to know them. It might not be as fast as showing how other characters react to them, but I don't know if that's like necessarily more accurate.
I feel like there are special cases. Let's take Homelander, for example, because that's the first person I thought of. You can't use the reactions based off of the public's opinion of him as the character he actually is. You have to take the reactions based off the people that actually know him, like Maeve and pretty much the rest of the seven, as the type of character he is. What he does as well in that show, well, he does bad stuff that people like don't see. I don't know. I feel like there are special case characters like him where it's kind of like a duality of what they do and how people react to them as well.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, because like another example I'm thinking of is Shrek. Like if you look at Shrek based on the way people react to him, like that opening scene, he's like, well, the villagers are all like out to get him before we really see him do very much, and then we do get him like scaring them away. But if we take it based on just like how people react to Shrek when they first see him, for one thing, that's a prejudice thing where that's coming from. It's not like a reputation like it is with Homelander or Miranda, but like that's not an accurate representation of who Shrek is.
He was also like, to add to that, he was also doing everything that they expected him to do. Like he was, we talked about that. He was reacting based off the prejudice. He was like, well, they think I'm gonna do this, so I might as well do it anyway.
Right. So like, and that still tells us something about him, but I don't know that like their reaction to him is like ultimately that's not what
the truest.
Yeah. So I don't want to like discount that lesson that we were both taught of like how someone reacts to a character is like, that is a good way to show who a character is. But I think it's maybe more like this is the quickest way to let someone know.
For an introduction, for example, it's used really well here.
Yeah, I think as an introductory tactic, it's a really good idea, but maybe not for like if you're going to develop the character further, you might like I think we need those moments where we see them acting and like and at least for us to just understand why people react the way they do. Right. And we see that almost immediately with Miranda's intro. Like everyone's like, "Oh God, she's coming in!" Like, and the entire office is like thrown into chaos. And then she comes in and is like, "Oh, we see why." Like, if anything's out of place, like someone's getting their head chopped off, metaphorically. So like it's kind of a combination because like it's how characters react to her, but then she's backing it up with action. I've always been like. I've wondered about that a lot. That note, bit of a tangent, but I think a constructive one. What are some of your other reactions?
Hey, Stanley Tucci's in this. He's been in things. I'm upset. I can't remember anything outside of Transformers 4.
Spotlight. He was in that.
God, he wasn't he? We said that last time, and I couldn't remember. But I know he's also been in other. I know his name, and I know he's been in other things before that, but. I don't remember what movies I've seen.
We actually just referenced, you said you didn't see it, but he's in Hunger Games. That was one of the picks we were going through a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
I can't think of... I know we said when we did Spotlight, he's in the first Captain America movie, but in like a really small role.
Was he?
Yeah, he was like the scientist guy who gives him the steroids.
Oh my God.
I know they're not literally steroids, but they might as well be. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
I never recognized him at first, unless he's also in The Witch. He and Anne Hathaway, what the hell? He's in the HBO Max show Witches or The Witches coming out.
Yeah.
If his name isn't like on the cover, like I'm not gonna recognize him in the movie for some reason, even though he pretty much has the same face. It's normally just different outfits, and I'm like, man, that guy looks familiar.
He does tend to play like pretty different characters though. Like he has a distinct look, but he doesn't get typecast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like he does anyway. Maybe I just haven't seen enough of his stuff.
It's pretty hilarious how mean everyone is to Andy because fashion.
Hmm.
That kind of hooked me in the beginning, but then it started to get more serious, and I was like, oh man, go back to being mean. That was funny. Then I said I'm expecting Miranda to be put in her place at some point. But right now, I'm wondering why Miranda hired Andy. She obviously explained her reasoning. Miranda explained her reasoning, but yeah, I was wrong about expecting Miranda to be put. I was expecting Andy to snap at some point, but she more or less broke down, which is kind of the opposite.
Do you remember like about what point in the movie you made that note at, if you can? I'm just curious about like when
somewhere in the beginning when Miranda's just not thanking her for anything or something like that. She's doing the most, and then she did have that rant about how difficult it is or whatever, and I was like, oh, I guess this is as close as I'm gonna get to having Miranda be put in her place. Okay.
Yeah.
Never been a part or even seen the fashion industry, so I'm not sure they treat someone that looks like Anne Hathaway like they treat her. She's the best looking person I've seen so far, and I made that note for her character later. Like, that really kind of took me out of it. Like, the fact that everybody was like, hey, it's size 6, everybody, look at size 6. She looks like a freaking clown, haha. She dresses like a freaking librarian, haha. And I'm like, yo, y'all are wearing like 2 pounds of makeup, and you're thinner than a freaking tree branch. It's really, really off-putting and distracting. But, oh yeah, she just met Christian Thompson at a party. I did not like this character, and I'm glad we don't go into detail about him later on in the thing, but trash tier character. I have no idea where this story is going. Oh yeah, this is where I had no idea where it was going. She's becoming more like the company she works for. Glad I took note of that, because that was kind of the point of the movie.
And about when was that, would you say? I kind of feel like probably around like 3/4 of the way through, but like, do you know?
I think it was a little earlier. Whenever she met Christian.
Okay, so more like halfway.
Yeah.
Okay. I would agree with that. Like, I think that was close to how I was reacting around that time, my first go. But that was a while back, so I don't remember great.
Yep. This is also around the time I knew I recognized Emily's face, but I didn't realize it was Emily Blunt.
Yes.
Don't know why I didn't realize it was Emily Blunt. She looks really different. I'm guessing the BF is to give Andy someone to talk to about her thoughts. I also go into this writer character later. I really want Miranda to change, but at this point, over halfway through the movie, I think she's going to remain a static character. I was kind of obviously right about that, a little late to the party, but yep. Heels look uncomfortable as hell.
Yes.
I'm just going to say that. I've seen the way, like, there's, like, I think I saw, like, was it X-ray? It might have been an X-ray of, like, what a woman's foot looks like when they're in heels. Like, bro, I don't even like my sneakers sometimes. Like,
yeah.
I'm good.
I think I've, like, maybe tried on heels just because I was curious, like, how does it feel to have your feet like that? And, like, it wasn't even for that long. But I remember, like, just...
I bends in 2 different areas.
Yeah, like,
I'm good.
It seems really uncomfortable.
If you can rock heels, good on you. I'm not the type to think that women have to wear heels or anything that makes them uncomfortable. Like,
Same.
If you think it makes you look good, sure, but God, those look awful to wear. Don't F your feet up.
Yeah. As someone who worked a little bit in a sneaker store, like we were very conscious of like what shoes do for like certain strides. I don't think heels, but just based on what I learned working there, heels seem really problematic for your feet on many levels. Like, yeah, but
I don't like how forward Christian is, and I don't like his eyebrows. That's it. I didn't like him at all. Oh,
Agree. I don't know if we're gonna really get a chance to talk about him later. He might come up, but like, yeah, he's
I feel like if
very
that movie,
creepy.
if it were made today, it they'd make it a little more like more of a point as to how creepy of a guy he is. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
he
I
does read pretty different post Me Too, but like
yeah
even like when this came out, I don't think like textually like he comes off like pretty creepy. Just
yeah.
anyway, like
And his eyebrows, man, his ugh, looks
I
like an anime character's eyebrows.
I didn't notice his eyebrows at all. I'm trying to remember them now that you're saying it, but
They have like three splits on the ends of them. He he looks like a villain. It's really weird.
yeah, I see the villainous eyebrows there a little bit. In connection to like what I was saying about like I don't think this is a guilty pleasure. Like I think this is just a well written movie. And like
Hmm.
in a way that's like for like the first little bit that I was like getting into screenwriting and like when you hear like oh what are like great scripts reference you hear like Social Network, Memento, Pulp Fiction. I always go to Gone Girl or like
Raimi Spider-Man.
yeah, well, if any list that has that, we can't trust that list. But you know, like even stuff that like I've picked for like a lot of the earlier episodes for the show, like Nightcrawler and yeah, Gone Girl, Inside Out, like those are, and I still stand by like I think those are amazing scripts. But I think as like like someone who's just starting out, I don't know that those are necessarily the best thing to emulate. Like there are people like, you know, Memento was one of Chris Nolan's first movies. I don't know if it was necessarily one of the earliest scripts he wrote, but like some people I think can do that like big amazing thing right out the gate. But I mean, maybe this is just for me personally, but I feel like this is a better movie to emulate where it's not like doing anything crazy unconventional, but it's doing a lot of things right. It's doing a lot of things really well. So like it's not flashy, but I mean, I think there's something to be said for the fact that both of us had separate people use it as an example of like a good writing technique.
It's not flashy, but the clothes are.
Yep. Yeah, well, yeah, visually it's very flashy, but like the writing of it is not you know, it's not like Sorkin dialogue where it's like, "Oh, wow, look at how smart this is," or it's not like going all non-linear like Tarantino or anything like that. Like it's very low-key writing that you don't really notice that how it's doing everything well. You're just enjoying it.
Or Community's dialogue.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Community gets a little bit. I'd say that falls under flashy writing, but it's a little of both because like you can just have fun watching it and not notice. But like,
Ah, so many good jokes.
yes, oh my, yes, so many. Just to add on to that, like if you are a like writer of any kind, but especially if you're a screenwriter, I would really encourage that you go read the script because like there's some really good action lines in there that are just like I'm trying to think of some.
Miranda swings at Amy, and Andy ducks, and then Andy hits her in the stomach with a belt.
Yeah, that was a deleted scene. Um, no, but like actually, there's the one line that's coming to mind is in the scene with the belt. It says like when it's describing the two belts, like it's like Miranda holds up two belts to Andy and to us. They look like exactly the same thing, and like that's the kind of line that like it's kind of talking about something that's like subjective and kind of unfilmable, but like it's really important. There's a lot of stuff like that in
Right.
there.
I was about to say that sounds like something that sounds like cheating. Both of my screenwriting professors are you can't get into the head of the audience and the no, just audience. You can't get into the like characters. You can't get into the head of
Yeah,
the audience and characters in your action. It has to be whatever's filmable, whatever's gonna be on the screen.
yeah, and that's a good rule to follow. A lot of times, like
In the beginning, yeah.
well, it depends because like I've been like I read like random I say yeah random people scripts for like a coverage job that I do, and one of the requirements for the one that I'm working with right now is like it asks like, are there unfilmables? And sometimes there's a lot, and like it's just you can't.
Reads like a novel.
Yeah, it'll say something that's like, oh, this is their reaction and it carries all this weight. And I'm reading it and I'm thinking, there's no way an actor, like, even if you get like Daniel Day-Lewis or I don't know, some like DiCaprio or Meryl Streep, like playing this part, you can't get that across in this line. But I think an example of like, so if you take an example like the ones that are in this script, they're like, they're not really unfilmables. It's like, there are ways to read this, but like you can automatically get a picture in your head of like, how is this being played? Like what inflection is the person's using? Or with the belt example, like that really translated. Like it's important in that scene. Like that's a very specific visual thing because we see both those belts and it's like, yeah, they aren't exactly the same, but like they might as well be. I think that's the exact reaction you have when you see it. It's like, yeah, they're the same belt. Like, so to us and to Andy, like we can already imagine like into Andy's head, like she sees that the way we do. So I think it's like really effective to call it out that way in the action line. But there's a lot of stuff like that in the script that I would really encourage writers to go look at because it's like there's some really good stuff in there. Let's get into some of our topics. So first one is the world of the story, obviously the fashion industry. So the first thing I want to look at with this is like the rules and the values of the world. So we tend to talk about world building a decent amount, I feel like, but this is kind of something we've never really touched on, which is like, I think it's an important thing to establish with anything, but especially with something like this. What are the rules and what are the values of this world? What are limits and consequences of doing certain things? Obviously with this one, how you dress is crazy important, and we see that visually like pretty early, and I think it carries through. But like I'm just gonna read off a few of like the rules and values that I feel like are shown. Everything has to be perfect. Details really matter. You're either all in or you're not in at all. There's big consequences if you don't follow the rules. Like Emily has that line about one of the old secretaries, like she screwed up, now she works at TV Guide. It's like, oh, you're like your career can end because of this. How you eat is very important. Results are rewarded, effort isn't. I think that's a really important one. And then fear is like a lot more effective of a tactic than love. This is more like Miranda's perspective of like, how do you impose order? Like it's all fear. Like nobody is trying to get in her graces. They're trying to not get on her bad side. And then also like Miranda's word is gospel. It feels like she sets the values, and like if you please her, you're doing well. If you don't, you are not. And it's as simple as that. Did you have anything to add to that?
I never really cared for fashion or what was in. Hoodies, hats, winter or baseball cap, jeans, sweatpants, shorts when it's hot, stylish sneakers, t-shirt. I don't need anything besides those or like a coat I can wear until it becomes unrecognizable as a coat. Then I'll get a new one. But like this world is intense, bro. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad I'm not in it because I'd probably be made fun of every day for wearing what I wear. I actually don't have anything for this other than the movie. It really made me feel like the fashion industry basically was the entire world, which makes sense. It never dipped into other industries like the film industry, for example. But it made me realize what goes into the clothes that will eventually end up in our homes. Well, expensive ones if they end up there. But even like the normal ones, there's a lot that goes into those designs and all that. So kudos to the movie. It's not the industry I ever want to be in.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely same. Like I take a pretty similar approach to clothes that you were saying. Like it's stuff that I wear. And that's about it. Like when I told some people that like we were doing this, they're like, you like a movie about clothes? Because like anyone who's ever like been clothes shopping with me, like it's not a good time. I'm very bad to shop for clothes with. I can't. I don't know what I'm looking at. But like, I still really enjoyed this movie, which is like in any other context, I I hate talking about like clothes and colors of. I don't even really know how to say it. Like, I don't have the words to talk about it, but I think it's a testament to how good Aline Brosh McKenna, the writer, did expressing this world that like someone outside of it, like me and you, can really get a good sense of it. So the next subtopic with this is Miranda. I mean, obviously, she is the embodiment of the fashion industry. At first, I was kind of looking at it like she is, like, if this is a religion, she is the god of that religion. But then, like, going through it again, I was kind of like, I don't know if that's actually true. She's more like the leader, like the Pope. She is like the biggest follower of her religion, but she's not in control of it. She just knows the rules better than everyone else. I think one of the biggest things that like comes up later is when we kind of see that like, you know, she for most of the movie looks like she's giving out all the orders. And then pretty late in it, we see that she's actually kind of more enslaved to it than anyone else. And it's by choice, but she like really cannot break away from it. And like she has to sacrifice everything else to remain Miranda Priestley. I think they did a really good job because like she stays like this really intimidating and powerful villain, but we also like get to humanize her without reducing that. And like there's some villains that I think that kind of works for, and some that like you don't want a moment like that with. Like I don't think we need a moment like that with the Joker, but someone like her or maybe like Killmonger from Black Panther, like it's really important to have those humanizing moments.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to add? We've already talked about her a bit.
Like I said, I thought she changed by the end. As I kept watching the movie, I realized, oh no, she's not gonna change, no. And when I realized she wouldn't change, I stopped thinking I was predicting how the movie would go. Because, like I said, I thought this was going to be like, Andy's going to change her by the end. I know where this movie is going to go. They're going to become friends over time. She's got to warm up to Andy's warmness. And then once I reached the scene with Miranda and Andy, and Miranda was crying over her divorce, and then she just stuck to her guns about being an unfeeling, I don't know if business tycoon is the word. Like,
I think that's, yeah, that works.
Okay. This was like the turning point for me. That and then the thing with Christian at the party. I don't like Christian. I'm sorry.
Mm.
But I'd say this was more the turning point for me where I was like, oh no, she's not going to change. So now what? What the hell's about to happen?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things with that. One, I think there absolutely is a worse version of this movie where that does happen. I feel like I've seen other movies that have a similar character do that, but nothing's really coming to mind. But I feel like I've definitely seen that. The other thing with that is Miranda Priestley is like pretty strongly based off of Anna Wintour, who's the editor of Vogue, a real person. This movie is based on a book that is technically fictional, but it's written by someone who worked at Vogue for a while, and like it's pretty clear like she had a similar experience to what Andy does in this movie of like working for, it was Anna Wintour. I don't think it's ever like explicitly stated, but it's pretty clear that that's who it's supposed to be. And she has like a reputation for being very similar to Miranda Priestley as she's portrayed in this, I think. Like when this movie came out, Anna Wintour apparently like kind of went around to a bunch of other big fashion magazines and designers and said like, hey, if you put your stuff in this movie, like you're gonna pay for it on my end. I don't know exactly what the threat was or if it was a threat, but like she kind of pulled her weight and was like, I do not endorse this. So a lot of big designers who like they wanted to get involved in this movie with all the clothes backed out because she has that kind of pull in the industry.
Well, that was pretty Wintourable of her.
Yeah. I understand. I mean, you can understand it though. Like this, I mean, having Meryl Streep play you helps, but you know, we're not meant to really like Miranda Priestley in this. Like, it doesn't present her very favorably. So I get it. Like, I actually also I found an interview today where Anna Wintour interviews Meryl Streep. It's not about Devil Wears Prada. It's about The Post, because apparently the character that Meryl Streep plays in The Post, and it was friends in real life with Anna Wintour. So they were kind of talking about that. But there's like a moment in the beginning of the interview, Anna Wintour asks Meryl Streep, like, what's one of the most interesting or like favorite or hardest roles to prepare for? And there's this like awkward few seconds of silence, and they both know what she's thinking. Like, I could say Miranda Priestley, but like we're just not gonna go there. But I was so glad I like had the subtext there, because you really feel it in that moment. Maybe I'll link to that video. And the interview was like 10 years after this movie came out. It's kind of cool. Moving into our next subtopic, the monologue about the belt. I think this is like such a pivotal scene. It's a memorable one too. I think we really needed that moment, or I felt like I needed that moment as like an outsider who like doesn't understand how fashion works. I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, that like there's more to fashion than just clothes, is kind of like the point of this monologue. Is like, this is so such and such, like designers did this, and like 500 jobs were involved in making that sweater that you're wearing. And I was kind of like, oh wow, okay, so nobody's exempt from this. No matter how you dress, what happens in these rooms is dictating that to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
I was really glad we had that moment. I don't feel like it even really lends that much context to the rest of it. It's not like the stakes are heightened, but it does show that like there is an extent to which this matters. It's not just like frivolous, I guess, even if it kind of does seem that way on the surface if you're an outsider, like most viewers probably are. I think the monologue speaks for itself in a lot of ways as like how important it is, but I think it still deserves to be called out as a really important scene.
Kind of tuned out when she went on the monologue about the belt, because I understood the gist, that just being fashion important, but I didn't really see it as important, or initially didn't see it as important as you saw it, like the way you just broke it down.
Well, I think just transitioning into the next little topic, which is exposition of the world, I think that was a big part of it, but also something that we needed spelled out for us in that way. But a lot of the other exposition is a lot less easy to see. Like, a lot of it's visual, for one thing. Like that opening montage, we see Andy like getting ready, and she has a very different routine than those other like random fashion characters that we see.
Clackers?
Yeah, well, in specifically that montage, there's like 2 or 3 other like random people that we see getting ready, and like they're not actually characters, but I think I think it's implied that they're like some of the clackers, but like there's pretty clear visual differences there, and it carries throughout. Like for the first half hour or so, like Andy stands out among everyone else there.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty clear like one of these things is not like the other one. It also helps that we have Andy as an outsider who is asking the questions that we're asking and reacting the way that she is. But we also get 2 people who are in it and like big believers in all of it, which is Nigel and Emily. They kind of acknowledge that it's extreme, but they're drinking the Kool-Aid. Like they are really invested in this world in a way that Andy isn't. But like they're following all the rules. So I think it's important that we have both of them for it too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, because you said Kool-Aid.
Okay, gotcha. There's also like kind of a gradual exposition of it too, like in terms of how extreme it is. Like we see that it's pretty heightened right away with that Miranda's intro scene and everyone like panicking, but like we don't really get to see just how extreme it is until a little later. Like that hurricane scene comes like maybe 30 minutes in, 25 maybe. And we get a sense pretty early like this is going to be a demanding job, but not like I was really surprised when I first saw that scene. Like she expects Andy to get her home during a hurricane.
Yep.
And like is like totally unironically no apologies, like get me home during this hurricane. But I think it's good that like we can't start off with that, but it's timed well, I guess is what I'm saying. Like it doesn't come too early or too late. I have one other question, but did you have anything on this before we get into that?
Nope.
So I was kind of wondering, do you think there's like a male equivalent to like, in terms of like how high the standards are for this? Like there's men's fashion, but this is like, at least from what we see in this movie, it's a pretty female-centered field, and it has like all these extreme rules and standards. So I was kind of wondering, like, is there a male equivalent to that?
Maybe film. I don't know everything there is to know about it. Plus, I don't know if it can be classified or if it is classified as male-centric. Guess it depends on the person you ask, maybe. But maybe film. Maybe lumberjacking.
Lumberjack. I mean, I would imagine it's pretty demanding.
Construction.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking, like, this is not a perfect parallel. Like, maybe sports. Like, there's some pretty high standards for that. The reason it's not a perfect parallel is, like, sports is something you very much choose to go into. Instead of, like, Andy kind of stumbles upon this job in a way that you couldn't stumble your way onto the Lakers or something like that. It's not,
hey, LeBron. Oh, I'm your starting point guard.
Not just,
okay.
Yeah, it's not like, I don't know, any basketball players, but sure, I'll go with LeBron. It's not like LeBron has any aspirations beyond what he's doing right now.
Yeah, I really want to be a ballerina dancer, but I'm just doing this basketball thing just to tide me over until that kicks off.
Yeah, he's not auditioning every night, but, it's just paying the bills. But, like, I think for sports, at least, like, it's equally high standards. Like, it's insanely competitive. So, like, if you don't commit your whole life to it, you probably won't make it. Like, there's a few anomalies that I feel like I've heard of. But for the most part, like, if you're in the NFL, you've been playing football since at the latest high school. And you've probably devoted your entire life to football after a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it's got a similar thing of, like, this is sort of a topic we're going to talk about later, but, like, I think there's some people who go into sports thinking, like, I am putting everything on this. If you don't succeed there, like, what else is, like, worth doing? And I think that's kind of the approach that, like, for Emily, that's her approach. Like, she is the equivalent of that kind of football player, where she's like, if I don't get to go to Paris, if I'm not doing exactly what I'm doing right now, there is no other job that's worth having.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a perfect parallel, but it's similar. I also threw around maybe like tech. I guess that's not quite as like male centric.
You better put these wires together, or it's your ass.
Yeah, I mean, kind of.
Program this computer right to say the alphabet, or you'll never work in this industry again.
Yeah, maybe tech's not as good of a parallel.
I'm just saying tech things. It could be hella demanding, way more demanding than any of these industries. I don't know.
Well, but I don't know that. I mean, a lot of like industries, if you get high enough up, will be like, if you want to be the best at something, of course you're going to have to work hard at that and like conform to it to a certain extent.
When it becomes your life.
Yeah. Like there is an extent to which this movie is very like universal to other jobs, like very far beyond fashion. But this is sort of a unique world there. So I was kind of wondering what other ones might fall into that. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is how this movie forces its protagonist into really hard choices. Again, this is like something that I think is a common writing technique that should, like, it's something that you usually want to do, is like make your protagonist have choices instead of just things happening to them. And Andy has to make a lot of decisions throughout this movie, so that's good. Like I feel like the dramatic question for it was like, how much is she willing to sacrifice for this job? The movie puts her job up against basically everything in her life. Like, she has to choose between her jobs and her friends, her boyfriend, her dad, her sanity, her soul, her time off, and like by a certain point, she has sacrificed basically all of those things for this job.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good technique. Like, it shows us a lot about Andy, but it's also just compelling drama. Almost every scene for at least the first half of the movie is basically her deciding between her job and one of those things.
This movie would have been real short if Miranda was like, "Go get me my coffee," and she was just like, "No, I quit."
Yeah, well, I mean, that's... yeah.
Devil gets a new assistant.
Right, but like that's kind of the thing that's hanging over her head the whole time. Like I think there's and we'll get into this in a bit, like there is a question of like, why doesn't she leave? Because like there are reasons to.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we'll get into this. Like, I think there's enough reasons to stay that we don't really question it, but also like at a certain point I think we're meant to start judging her. And there's that moment where in the middle when she thinks she's going to get fired and is just kind of okay with it. It's when Miranda tells her to get the Harry Potter book, the unpublished one for her twin daughters, and she's like, I can't. And then but like I think that's a really important moment that like, even though it really doesn't change the tide of the story, it's like she is deciding that she's okay with it, but then when given the chance to stay, she stays. Like, that's a really important choice. Because, like, there's a situation where she could just say, no, I'm out at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, again, it'd be a pretty short movie, but, you know, it tells us a lot about her. It's kind of a choice, I guess, when she ends up having to screw over Emily to keep the job and she goes to Paris in her place. That, I think, was, like, an interesting one to look at, because Emily I think she almost specifically says like that this is still a choice. She's like, Miranda forced me into it, and Emily's like, no, she didn't. Like, you could still say no if you wanted to.
She'd get fired, but she could say no.
Right. So it's, in a way, it's a non-choice, but it is also not. Like, she does have a choice there. It's just not one that's, you know, it's kind of a lesser of two evils.
When Paris was brought up in the beginning, I knew that Emily would never get to go. It kind of felt like the cop a couple days, weeks, months, years away from retirement trope.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't mind it. I like being able to call it out. I normally feel betrayed, but also intrigued when the trope doesn't go this way, like the way I expected. But I can't think of a good example. But as soon as she mentioned Paris, I was like, well, you're not going. She was like, I'm here entirely for Paris. Paris, you know, so many clothes. And the more she went on about it, the more I was like, yeah, you're not going.
Yeah.
The movie demands it.
Yeah, well, I think I didn't have that same prediction. I don't think I was quite as on top of it as you were the first time I saw it. But I think it still feels earned when that happens. Like, I'm sure like some other people predicted that with you, but like it still feels like the right thing for the story, because Andy's kind of surpassing her at that point. So it doesn't, because I think there's another version of this that has the same situation where because Emily in that scene, like, she gets hit by the car, but it's already been decided at that point that she isn't going to Paris before that happens. It just happens at the same time. I think there's another version where she randomly just gets hit by a car and can't go to Paris, so Andy does. It's so much stronger to have it to be like not accidental. Like, it's a result of Andy working a lot harder, and like I was saying earlier, it's a choice. Like, she could still say, no, I quit. This is too important to Emily. I'm not going to take it away from her. And that doesn't like there's not a lot of incentive for her to do that, but she could.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a couple other things with this topic. I like that the choices have really clear consequences. Like it's a pretty linear relationship. Like as she's doing better with work, everything else starts to go worse. Like the rest of her life is
Mm-hmm.
declining. I liked Stanley Tucci's line. I think he says like, "Oh, that's how it's going. Wait till your whole life goes up in smoke. That means it's time for a promotion."
Mm-hmm.
And like, it owns it. Like that really is the sense that you get. And then I think I mentioned this on I think it was the last Airbender episode, but like same note from there. I like that they don't try to make meaning out of her bad decision. It still would have been better if she had quit. In some ways, it would have been better if she had quit earlier in terms of like her maintaining like the life part of her work life balance. Like she
Mm-hmm.
leaves some real destruction, and I don't know that I necessarily want to blame her for that, but things don't just suddenly all get better when she quits. I liked that it felt more consistent. Or not consistent, but realistic, I guess.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else on this topic?
Just that I started to get more and more pissed off. The more she'd ignore her family and friends to fulfill her job, but I guess that was the point. So the writer did their job.
Yeah, I think I do kind of wonder like what point we're kind of intended to start judging her for her choices because it's like somewhere in the middle there that I think you're meant to start saying like, oh, this is she's kind of making a bad move here, but I don't know if there's a clear moment for that.
Mm-hmm.
But also like I don't know, like how much do we really want to like judge her for making these decisions because like it's still like a job. She needs to make money somehow. She's going into her field and like I think maybe in some ways like the movie is a little bit too harsh to her. And that's in a way like as a writing technique that's not necessarily a bad thing because you want to make things hard for your protagonist. That's usually a technique that I feel like people harp on. But also like it's kind of putting I think maybe an undue amount of blame on her for like oh she should have like not sold her soul to the devil or whatever and there's an argument for that but I think there's an argument also that like her friends and Nate could have been a little bit more understanding about her job to a certain extent like there's blame on both sides there but I did see a couple of videos that like talked about how this movie deals with work culture and it brings nuance to it but like there's interesting things that are done and in some ways I don't know like if it ages well into like the 2020 job market but I think it's worth looking at and again it's a testament to that this is not like a guilty pleasure movie like it's dealing with some real world themes so
Mm-hmm.
so that I guess I kind of just covered a couple things for our next topic, which is like motivations for each character. So I think I kind of mentioned this earlier. Like when these characters are doing things, mostly Andy, but also other ones like that seem like why would they do this? There's like a clear goal that they're all going after that is driving them. So like for Andy it's and I think this line gets a little overused but they say like if you work a year for this magazine you can work anywhere like at any magazine that you want so that's a big incentive and like big enough that we don't have to question too much of like why is she sticking it out and then for the other two like major characters with this Nigel has a job that he's working toward and then Emily has Paris.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're all like torturing themselves with this job, but they all have like a silver lining that they're working up to. And that's a really important thing, I think, for any character that you're making. If they have a goal, it solves a lot of problems and you understand it can drive all of their actions. And like even Miranda is kind of like she kind of has already attained her goal, but she has to keep working to
Keep it.
stay on top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not like she's always going to be there. And like, I think the whole situation at the end is like threatening her position as editor-in-chief, and she pulls a lot of strings to stay there. I didn't quite follow all of that, but I'm pretty sure that's the gist of it. But then, like, kind of tied in with it, we have, near the end, we see that, like, every promise is a little bit empty. Or more than a little bit. Like, Nigel, at the end, Stanley Tucci's character, gets, like, completely screwed out of his job. And, like, and I think that's meant to be, like, that's the last straw for Andy, is like, oh, wow. If someone as important and loyal as Nigel isn't getting what he wants out of this, and, like, his 15 years or whatever of working for Runway is kind of getting sidelined, what chance do I have at, like, getting what I was promised here? Same with Emily. Like, she's clearly been there a while, and then as soon as it's not convenient, Miranda doesn't even give a second thought to, like, not bringing her to Paris. I really liked that. I don't know if we want to call it a theme, but it's a really interesting thing that this movie does. And I think it like translates to real world jobs. Like, why do we work jobs that are terrible or that we hate or pay terribly? Any of us, I think, is like something that most people of a certain age can bring to this. Like, I know I've seen this twice, and I think between the first and second time, I've had a few other jobs, and, like, different ones from the ones I've had before. And I think it, like, hit a lot of parts of this hit differently in light of that. Like, I've never worked a job as extreme as this, but there were moments where I was like, oh, I think I, like, vibe with that more now than I did before. And I'm sure there's a lot of moments that, like, maybe I don't vibe with that a lot of other people watching this do. They're like, man, I know exactly how that feels. But we all also, like, have that implicit experience of, like, I'm working this job to do X. It's a way in, or it's paying the bills or something. I think it's used to good effect.
Yeah, I can relate. Working jobs they don't want to do to achieve something else. I don't know anybody that really can't relate to this. I don't think anybody started off like their first job being their dream job, position, pay, and everything. I'm sure there are anomalies, like, hey, I just got out of high school and now I am a superhero. Yeah.
I mean, child actors, I guess, a little bit could be an exception. Because,
if
like,
that's what they wanted to do their whole life, but how do you know when you're a child, you know?
Fair. Yeah. I mean, a lot of them, there's a few that have turned out okay, but a lot don't, or they get out of the game pretty quickly and are just kind of, like, working regular jobs by the time they're, like, 30.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, yeah, who gets their dream job at, like, any early stage? Yeah, nobody.
Yeah, doing those temporary jobs is what Andy viewed it at first, is what, like, I think everyone has to do at some point. It's like a rite of passage for being an adult. Yeah, I had 2 jobs in the past 2 years. I don't know how long ago it was. I think I left the bank job at the beginning of this year, but I've had a couple jobs, like, not even, like, there have been, like, internships and stuff as well that, you know, don't directly correlate. It's not that they were bad jobs, but they don't directly correlate to me being a novelist, or, author. You know, I wasn't writing at my freaking retail jobs.
Yeah, they're just paying the bills.
Right.
And, like, they can still be good experience, but, you know, you're making minimum wage.
Yeah.
But I think, like, those kinds of, yeah, like we're saying, everyone's had that. But I think there's also, like, some specific moments in this that are, like, hitting some of those things where, like, sometimes you're working a job and you're just like, what is the purpose of what I'm doing? And, like,
be like that with school sometimes too, and those classes never helped me either. Like gen ed.
Yeah, some of those English classes.
Math.
Oh my god,
what did I need math for?
Math.
Am I doing calculus right now as a 23-year-old? Sorry.
Yeah, who needs numbers? I think there's just, like, a lot of moments in this that resonate across just so many fields. And I was wondering, like, because this came out in 2006, like, does this translate, especially, like, the promise of, like, work a year at this job and you can work wherever you want.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's really a thing that is still true in 2020.
I guess it depends.
Yeah, like COVID didn't help with that, but even before COVID hit, I feel like just the job market right now is like I feel like I was raised with the idea of like you can get a job and keep it for like 40 years if you want. But then I hear all these stats about like even people who are like in their 40s and 50s right now, and especially like millennials, however you define millennials, they jump between jobs like every couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know that there is the idea of this like gateway job that's like, wow, this is like setting your reputation forever. I mean, maybe those exist, but I have not felt that in what little exposure I've had to the job market.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of this movie ages well, but that's one aspect that I kind of wonder at, like, is that a thing still?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else with that?
Nope.
So we've kind of touched on this a bit, I guess, but the next topic I have is gaining access to Andrea as a protagonist. When I've heard the term like emotional access used, that can be good or bad. Like, we have emotional access to Miranda in like sort of a negative way of like, oh, look out for her, and like she's gonna be demanding, whatever. And we have like the reverse kind of access with Andrea, where for the first half of the movie at least we're sympathizing with her. But I just wanted to look at a bit of like why that happens. I think a major thing is that she is like, her relationship to the fashion world, like we've said, is probably what most of the audience's relationship is too. Like, she doesn't care. She doesn't know much about it. So in that way, she's like normal, where the rest of the world of this movie is weird. Not weird, but like other. And in some cases, like, I think the protagonist is the inverse of that. But like, that helps us gain access to her. But she's also like specific enough that, you know, she's has a goal as like a journalist and is like driven. Like, she feels like she doesn't feel like an every person character where it's just kind of like person, like normal person. They're not using like shorthand for that like they do with some characters. Like, she feels specific. That's another thing that I think helps. And we also have a contrast with Emily, where someone who's in the same position as her but is taking a very different approach and is hardcore drinking the Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas Andy isn't. Yeah. I gotta stop saying that. It's such a good phrase, though. Yeah, and like we were talking about just a minute ago, like, I think a lot of what gives us access to her is the fact that we've all been there, of like working that job that you hate. So that provides access. But later, I think a big thing is also that we see that this is kind of a matter of pride for her. That it's not just like, oh, I want this job, I want what I'm getting out of it. At a certain point, it's also, I want to prove to myself that I can do this job, as hard as it is. Like, it's going to feel like a failure if she gives up. Something that like I was noticing with this is like, we have a lot of access to her, and then there's a point where we are supposed to start judging her. And I think that's interesting because there's a lot of characters in other movies and stories that have like that decline arc where they start off kind of an okay person, and then by the end they're like terrible. Someone like Michael Corleone in The Godfather, or Walter White, or like Jordan Belfort. And, you know, Andy isn't like one of those characters because, you know, she's still like kind of the person you're rooting for by the end, but she has kind of a similar decline to them. She's kind of like, in a way, getting worse throughout the movie. Like, so I just kind of wanted to look into that a little bit because I think it's sort of a unique case where like she almost completes that fall arc, but then kind of turns it around at the end. So I don't know if you had anything on that. It's just interesting because like we have access to her as like this really upstanding, like hardworking person, and then pretty late in it we're supposed to start judging her because I don't feel like her fall starts until, I mean, you could kind of say like when she like gets the whole I'm trying to think of the word for it, but the montage where like she gets all the like runway clothes. you can say like that's the beginning of her decline, but I don't know. It's just an interesting version of that arc. So
Emily and Nate allow the audience access to her internal thought. More Nate, obviously, because that's her boyfriend. They also serve as plot devices, showing how Andy comes to decisions that screw her peoples over, like screwing Nate over with his birthday and all the other stuff, and then Emily with the Paris thing.
yeah, I think that is kind of like a good indicator of. I guess they're a good litmus test in a way throughout, where like at the beginning she's never like loyal to Emily, I guess, but you can kind of see like through the way she's treating the two of them is kind of like where she's at because she's never like actively mean to Emily. Like they don't exactly get along, but she's like being basically nice to her for most of the movie, but then still, screws her out of Paris.
Yeah.
And yeah, same with Nate. I mean, part of that is just like showing how much he's giving up for the job, but he does kind of feel like I don't really want to say like the moral center of the movie, but like when he's judging her, it really does feel like it's asking us to judge her. So I think the two of them do give a good amount of access to her, but more so like negative access, I think. Or at least it's felt more there. Did you have anything else on this topic?
Jordan Belfort. We have a whole lot of access to him before his decline begins. Remember the decline being somewhere in the third act of The Wolf of Wall Street, I think. We're here. I think it starts as soon as she makes the decision to stay to prove she can do the job. I don't. It's somewhere near the middle, maybe like beginning, the middle, somewhere in there. But,
Yeah, I think it's like almost exactly the middle.
yep. Whenever she's like, "Okay, I'm not quitting," like that's when as soon as it's all downhill from there.
I think that might be right because like because that's the moment where she is like thinking of getting out. So at that point, she is like willing. Like prior to that point, it feels like, and to like what she's telling herself is, I'm not willing to sell my soul for this job. But that's also when she kind of thinks she has nothing to lose. And again, I do kind of let's kind of continue the comparison with like Jordan Belfort because she says at the beginning like, "Oh, I'm not gonna like this job isn't gonna change who I am." Like she kind of laughs it off. And then by the end, we see that like she could be Miranda if she wants to. I think is kind of how we're supposed to read like their last scene together. It's been a little while since I've seen Wolf of Wall Street. I don't know if you're more familiar with it than I am.
Yeah, I
but
saw
like,
it once.
but like with Jordan Belfort in that, like I feel like there's just he's so much more into his world of being a stockbroker and being like the world's biggest frat boy ever. Like he seems like I'm gonna just use the phrase again. He drinks the Kool-Aid of that a lot more.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I think like I think they're like kind of apt comparisons to each other because I feel like I remember in Wolf of Wall Street there's a few moments where like when he's first getting into stockbroking and he's like, oh, you do like insane amounts of drugs every day, and like I want to say it's like Matthew McConaughey's like, oh yeah, like you're gonna need to, and he's like, oh really, and then like I think we'd already even heard at that point there's this monologue where he takes like insane amounts of drugs that could sedate Manhattan for a week or something. He ends up like being what he didn't think he would be, but do you feel like he's like averse to it in the way that Andy is, or is it like more is it less sharp of a turn there?
No, he's definitely not averse to it. No.
But I think we could have a version of this where Andy is, and I don't know how true that is of like the author who wrote the book this is based on, where she is into fashion and then gets kind of disillusioned from it. That would have been a very different movie, but I think it's another way into this is that you have someone who is more of an Emily and is like, I really want to work for Runway. And then by the end is like, oh, working for Runway is not worth it.
Run away from Runway.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of where the theme lands. Run away from Runway. So the last topic I have here is amplifying conflict. So I think this might be one of the biggest things that makes it work. Everything in this is within the realm of reality, it's very extreme. I think it's kind of tied into world building, and we kind of talked about this at the beginning, where like people are saying that all these insane things happen, where like Miranda ruins some person's career, or like if you don't get her coffee right on time, it's gonna, there's gonna be big consequences for you. And I think there's some movies that will kind of present that something similar, where they're like, oh, you can't mess up this, or like this villain is so powerful, and then it kind of doesn't back it up. And the amplified conflict of this is what the Kraken backs it up. Kraken is a good example of that, I think.
Until the third movie, when it's just on a beach.
Yeah, R.I.P. But I think a good counterexample is like, I think we've talked about this before, Apocalypse in X-Men Apocalypse.
Oh god.
Where he's like they're building him up. I remember the trailers were like, he's essentially what ancient cultures thought was God, and he's like this all-powerful being, and then they like get to the final battle and it's like,
burn him. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, he's still like intimidating, but not like the level of intimidating that they were building him up to be.
His voice makes it sound like he's been sucking on a muffler pipe.
I don't remember that, but okay.
You don't remember Oscar Isaac's voice for that?
I don't think I'd seen Oscar Isaac in anything else before that. But now looking back, it's like he's almost unrecognizable, which, good acting, maybe.
I don't know about that. I think he did what he could.
Yeah, he was kind of borrowing from Voldemort, I think, with his vibe there.
He had a nose, though. He wasn't borrowing that.
Yeah, he had a nose, so not fully, but otherwise, in performance sense. But, I think it's important that in Prada, that the world and Miranda, like, they put the money where their mouth is. Like, this is really extreme. I think it also ends up excusing some of the, like, selling your soul dialogue, because, like, there's a few points where the dialogue gets a little on the nose with, like, I think the phrase "drink the Kool-Aid," sorry to use it again, is used in the, I think it's used in the movie somewhere. I want to say one of Andy's friends
Don't say it again.
uses it. I'm not going to say it. I'm probably not going to say it again. And like, I think the phrase "selling your soul," I think Emily says that at some point. Like, she says, like, you sold your soul the day you put on the Jimmy Choos. And that feels a little on the nose, but also like, this is really amplified, and they're talking about the job and like these jobs and some of the aspects of this world in a way that like is kind of like throwing like their approach to life into question. It's believable that they are having to like approach it on this level where they can say these on the nose things. And the biggest thing that I think like amplifying the conflict does well with is that almost every task that Andy gets feels impossible.
I don't know how she did it.
No, like the standards are so insanely high, and a lot of them she can't do. The hurricane scene is the biggest example.
I guess
like,
Miranda was like expecting her to talk to God or something, like, yo, call this hurricane off. My boss is trying to get home. Like, bro, Miranda needs to relax. And then she was still upset about it in the next scene. She was like, I heard the play was wonderful. I'm like, bro, what? Like,
yeah. I know, yeah, and that's the thing too. She is like so unapologetic about it. She's like, you still should have gotten me home. And Andy's like, how? Now that you mentioned that, I'm now imagining like if you had like Andy calling God, he's like, Miranda needs to get home again, and she's like, oh, this has happened before. He's like, yeah, you.
Oh my god. Well,
one of many calls that I've gotten.
If she was actually the devil, you think she'd have like pulled like that with God? Maybe.
Maybe. I think the line in that scene still works pretty well, though. I think it's something like her dad's like, what's she expect you to do? Call in the National Guard? And she's like, wait, could I actually? Like, and like, it's played for a laugh, but like, that really does feel like that doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think it still feels believable, like remarkably enough. And like even that scene, like getting the Harry Potter novel. I know you're not a fan, but like 2006, getting the next Harry Potter novel, that's about as impossible as you can get in like a real world setting. Like nobody is getting that book before it comes out. And I kind of forgot in that scene, like Miranda did that like as a way to set up Andy to fail.
Yeah, that was a punishment.
Yeah, like she was, I don't know if I just missed that the first time I saw it, but like this time I was surprised to remember like, oh, she didn't like actually mean that. She absolutely expected Andy to fail. She just wanted to like throw salt on the wound and be like, see, you're not good enough. Yeah. Also, like, last little note with this, and spoilers for Whiplash and Mean Girls if you haven't seen it, but I did notice that all three of those movies, like this and those two, have a scene where someone sort of randomly gets hit by a car. And none of them are movies where you would expect that to happen. But they all have these, like, heightened worlds of extremely high standards and people, like, risking their entire livelihoods for some level of, like, perfection.
I still want to see Whiplash. Are you pushing or dragging? Rushing or dragging? This scene alone is like, bro, it's banned.
Yeah, I think we should talk about Whiplash at some point. It's not like I don't love it as much as a lot of people do. You haven't seen it. You just said
No,
you
I've
haven't
just
seen
seen
it.
scenes.
The rushing and dragging scene is like pretty famous now.
So you do know the difference.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. J.K. Simmons owns it in that role, and Miles Teller too. Two pretty solid
Bro,
performances.
the guy's hands were bleeding.
I just was remembering that because like all three of like Mean Girls, there's Regina George getting hit by the bus. I won't mention the exact scene in Whiplash, but like the scene in that, and then Emily getting hit by the car in this, it's like you don't go into any of those movies expecting someone to get hit by a car, but that's how extreme it gets.
I don't know why I imagine the trailer for this movie being like super zany. Like, how far is she willing to go? And then they just cut to the scene of Emily getting hit by a car. I imagined it being played for laughs.
I can see that as like a fan-made trailer. Like, do you ever see I watch a lot of, I think they're called style trailers, where it'll be like
Change the tone of what the movie actually was.
kind of, but it'll be like the one that I see a lot is it'll be trailers for other things in the style of the Infinity War trailer. Like they have one for Game of Thrones like that. They do like yeah. I don't love the actual Infinity War trailer, but like as a template for other things, like they use it as like a template. My favorite ones are like they do one for Game of Thrones, they do one for the last Harry Potter movie that just like get me so much more amped for it than the actual trailers. It's so good. Did you have anything else before we finish?
Nope. Like I said before, Raya did a great job building Andy's change and her turning away from her friends and family. Good job.
Okay. Yeah, I do just want to call out my favorite line from this. It's a line from Emily. I laugh every time. I think she says like, I'm on this new diet. Well, I don't eat anything. And then just when I feel like I'm about to faint, I eat a cube of cheese. I'm one stomachful away from meeting my weight goal. I love that line so much. There wasn't really a chance to talk about it, but I wanted to shout it out because it's like, it's so good. If that's all, we can go to the boilerplate. So you can still send in your responses for who you think would be a good fictional character in government. If you think Miranda Priestley would go somewhere better than the Supreme Court or president, then let us know. Or if you think
Head of CIA.
I think she'd work there. Or if you think like, I mean, if we want to go as ridiculous as some of your picks were, like if you want the heels from this to go in there, if you want Andy's blue sweater running the Department of the Treasury or
The
something.
belt.
Yeah.
The belt as the president because it'll hold the country together.
Oh yeah. Yep. That's a take. But yeah, send in your responses for those. our next episode is going to be on Circle, which I still haven't watched. And I don't know what my next pick's going to be. I have a couple contenders, but nothing definite, so I'm not going to say.
Space Jam.
Ooh, Space Jam. Yeah. Space Jam's coming up for you, right?
That's after Circle.
Yep. So Space Jam's on the horizon, too. Our logo is by Kelsey Hendry. Like us on Facebook, subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And go check out our Patreon. We have episodes on the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy that go about as well as you would expect them to, coming from us. And there's also notes from all of our regular episodes, and there's another bonus episode where it's pretty quick, but it's just me and Mason, who came on our Decade Recap podcast. We did a review of Tenet like right after seeing it, so that's on there. But $1 a month for the bonus episodes, $3 a month for checking out our notes. It will be worth your time and our money. Those are some very interesting episodes that we did.
The Raimi ones are worth the subscription alone.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Just our conversation about the street dance or Punch Me, I Bleed, I think that alone is worth a subscription. And the filler in between is like good enough that you don't have to just... Those were... I'm glad we're done, but I'm also really glad we did it.
Punch me, I bleed.
Yep. You're not supposed to be Spider-Man climbing those walls. That's another one that's worth the subscription. Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter at INTAnalysis18. You can follow me on Twitter at Davos Watson. And where can people find you?
Twitter at Jelani T. Kelly. Instagram at Base Phoenix. I post pictures of my characters on there. And twitch.tv/JBasePhoenix. We reached 5 subscribers. I'm trying to reach 10 for the end of November. We have our first emote as well. It's a picture of Lux with the text hype behind him. So it's really dope. And if I get enough subscribers, I get another emote unlocked, so I get more and more emotes. So get yourself a Lux emote by subscribing on Twitch.
Yep. Okay. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.